Hello everyone, and welcome to my The Bold Fans channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. According to The Bold and the Beautiful B&B spoilers, Taylor Hayes, Rebecca Budig, and Deacon Sharp, Sean Cannon, will instantly connect, while Luna Nozawa, Lisa Yamada, pushes Electra Forrester, Linnea Grace too far. The fall leaves fell like silent tears, blanketing the ground in golden and scarlet, as Taylor stood alone in the Forrester mansion's enormous garden. The air was crisp with a slight aroma of pine and the weight of whispered regrets. Her hands trembled as she clutched a letter she hadn't dared to open, the edges worn from days of carrying it in her pocket. It came from Ridge, the guy who had been both her anchor and her storm, whose love had defined her existence and whose absence now left vacant spots in her heart. The rumors said 5 things, and they shattered everything she believed she knew about her standing in the Forrester family. But it wasn't just about Ridge. It was about Deacon, the man who had entered her life like a shadow, bringing warmth when she was cold, only to spark a controversy that now threatened to destroy everything. Taylor's thoughts wandered back to the beginning, when love was a promise, not a conflict. She had met Ridge decades before, when the world was brighter and the Forrester name was associated with elegance and ambition. She was a young psychiatrist with a brilliant mind and a soft heart, captivated to Ridge's magnetism and the way his eyes carried secrets he never shared. Their love had been a whirlwind, passionate, absorbing, and always fraught with pitfalls. Brooke, Ridge's other half, his other heart, cast a perpetual shade over their pleasure. Taylor had battled for him repeatedly, believing that love could overcome turmoil. They raised a family of 3 children, Thomas, Steffi, and Phoebe, who carried both their dreams and their hardships. But love, Taylor discovered, was not a straight line. It twisted, fractured, and rebuilt itself in shapes she couldn't predict. The years had been good and painful in equal parts. Taylor had experienced loss, Phoebe's death, a never-healing wound, and numerous struggles with Brooke for Ridge's heart. She had fled Los Angeles, seeking calm in faraway places and reconstructing her life, only to be dragged back into the Forrester orbit. Each return was a reminder of what she had lost, and what she still wished for. Ridge was her weakness, an unfinished story. When she returned this time, she expected things to be different. She was older and wiser, her heart tempered by time. But the Forrester family was a tapestry of secrets, and she was going to reveal them. Deacon Sharp entered her life discreetly and unexpectedly. He was not Ridge by any means. Where Ridge was polished, Deacon was raw, with rough edges from a life of difficult choices. He was a man who had clawed his way out of the darkness, a former criminal with a charm that weakened her defenses. They met at a charity event of all places, where Taylor was lecturing about mental health and Deacon was serving drinks while attempting to rehabilitate his reputation. His smile was crooked, his comments unfiltered, and when he looked at her, she felt seen, not as Dr. Taylor Hayes, nor as Ridge's ex-wife, but as a woman bearing a lifetime of hidden anguish. They talked and joked, and for the first time in years, Taylor felt a spark of something she thought was long gone. Their connection developed in snatched moments: coffee at a cafe outside town, late-night discussions about atonement and remorse. Deacon knew brokenness. He displayed his scars freely, unlike the Forresters, who concealed theirs beneath fancy clothes and fake grins. Taylor did not intend for it to become more. She convinced herself it was harmless, a soothing balm for her loneliness. But one night under a starry sky, Deacon kissed her, and she did not draw away. It was a flaw in the armor she had spent years perfecting. She assumed it was a secret, a mistake. But secrets in the Forrester world never remained hidden. The controversy spread like wildfire. A grainy photo taken by an opportunistic paparazzi shows Taylor and Deacon outside a hotel, their hands brushing and their faces uncomfortably near. The headline screamed treachery, portraying Taylor as the villain, the woman who had tarnished the Forrester legacy. Steffi was enraged, her words as sharp as knives. "How could you do this to Dad? To us?" Thomas, divided between loyalty to his mother and father, retreated into silence. Eric, the patriarch, gazed at her in disappointment, a sight that wounded more than words. And Ridge was the worst. He did not shout or accuse. He simply looked at her, his eyes icy, and said those 5 words, "You're not who I thought." Those words repeated in Taylor's head as she stood in the yard, the letter still unopened in her palm. They weren't simply words. They were a verdict, an assessment of her entire existence. She'd spent years trying to be enough for Ridge, her children, and herself. But those 5 words stripped her bare, forcing her to question everything. Has she ever been enough? Had she ever really belonged in this family, with its never-ending cycles of love and betrayal? The letter in her fingers felt heavier now, as if it contained the answers she sought and feared. She ripped it open, her breath quickening as she read Ridge's handwriting. "I can't do this anymore," it began. The letter was brief, but every phrase was a blow. Ridge wrote of his pain, perplexity, and sense of betrayal. He did not address Deacon by name, but the implication was apparent. He wrote about their past, the love they had shared, and the tiredness that came with it. "We keep hurting each other," he wrote. "Maybe we always will." The last paragraph was the most difficult. "I need to let you go." Taylor's knees weakened, and she collapsed to the ground, the letter fluttering alongside her. The garden, which had once provided her with tranquility, now felt like a tomb for her hopes. The fallout was relentless. The already fragmented Forrester family proceeded to shatter even deeper. Steffi plunged herself into work, ignoring Taylor's calls. Thomas attempted to mediate, but his loyalty to Ridge made every conversation tense. Brooke, inevitably, grabbed the opportunity to resume her place by Ridge's side, her sympathy tinged with satisfaction. Taylor felt like an alien in the household she'd helped create. The tabloids didn't help, blasting her face on every cover, calling her a homewrecker and a traitor. She couldn't go around Los Angeles without being watched, judged, and whispered about. Deacon attempted to reach out, but Taylor shoved him away. The guilt felt oppressive. She didn't love him in the same way she adored Ridge, but she couldn't deny the comfort he had provided. Now that comfort came at an unexpected cost. She could see the pain in her children's eyes, Eric's disappointment, and Ridge's finality. She wanted to feel alive again, to recapture a part of herself that she thought had been lost. Instead, she'd lost everything. Days stretched into weeks, and Taylor retreated within herself. She stopped attending Forrester events and answering calls. Her profession, once her pride, was empty. How could she help others when her own life was in shambles? She spent hours at her apartment, staring at old images of herself and Ridge on their wedding day, Phoebe's smiling smile, and Steffi and Thomas as youngsters. Each image served as a reminder of what she had and had thrown away. The loneliness was a burden she couldn't bear, a constant companion who murmured her mistakes. Taylor sat at her desk one evening, a blank journal open in front of her, as rain fell on the windows. She hadn't written in years, not since Phoebe's passing, when words were her only outlet. She grabbed up a pen, her hand shaking. She wrote about love, sorrow, and the choices that shape us. She wrote about Ridge, both the man he was and the man she wished him to be. She wrote about Deacon, the temporary escape he provided, and the price she paid. She wrote about her children and how painful it was to fail them. Page after page, the words flowed out, raw and unfiltered, a map of her damaged heart. When she finished, the journal was almost filled and the rain had stopped. The silence felt different, less suffocating. Taylor wasn't sure if she could reconstruct what had been lost, if she could fix the wounds in her family or herself. But for the first time in weeks, she felt a spark of clarity. She wasn't just Ridge's ex-wife, Steffi's mother, or the lady from the tabloids. Taylor was imperfect and human, capable of making mistakes and being redeemed. She closed the notebook and stood, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. The woman peering back appeared tired, but there was also something else there. A spark, a determination. The Forrester family might never be the same again, and her place within it was unknown. But Taylor knew one thing. She was going to keep going. She would face the gossip, the judgment, and the anguish. She would find a way to heal, not only for herself but also for her children, for the love she still had, no matter how damaged it was. The letter from Ridge lay on the desk, its edges curled. Taylor did not pick it up. She did not need to. Those 5 words had badly hurt her, but they did not define her. She took a deep breath and stepped outside, allowing the cool night air to wash over her. The stars were weak, but they were there, reminding us that even in the darkest of times, there is light to be found. Ridge had always believed he understood the concept of loyalty. For years he'd been divided between two women who had molded his life in vastly different ways. Brooke, with her fiery personality, was passion personified. Taylor, with her quiet strength, was a safe haven, a steady voice in the storm. But life had a terrible way of demonstrating that even the most meticulously crafted worlds could crumble with just a few words spoken at the wrong moment, in the wrong place, and with the wrong intention. It began gently, as scandals always do. Whispers echo through the corridors of Forrester Creations. Taylor and Deacon exchanged a gaze that lasted too long. Ridge initially disregarded it, unwilling to allow suspicion to undermine the delicate balance he had worked so hard to establish. But balance is an illusion. Truth has a habit of clawing its way to the surface, no matter how deeply it is buried. He wasn't expecting what he heard that night. He'd arrived home late, exhausted from meetings, his mind racing with plans, deadlines, and family responsibilities. He stepped in to see Brooke sitting straight on the sofa, her eyes red and clutching a crumpled tissue in her palm. She did not speak at first. The stillness went on, heavy and stifling, until she finally looked at him with a keen gaze that sliced through the space between them. "She betrayed you," Brooke said softly, her voice shaking. "Taylor." "With Deacon." The world went silent around him. Ridge was no stranger to betrayal. He had experienced it and perpetrated it on others. What about Taylor? He shook his head, refusing to believe. Brooke's words felt like poison oozing into his veins, impossible to avoid. Nonetheless, he wanted proof. When the confrontation arrived, it was not the ferocious, shouting catastrophe he had anticipated. Taylor stood in the living room, pale but determined, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. Ridge demanded the facts, his voice gruff and disbelieving. Taylor nodded, maintaining a steady calm that broke him more than denial could. "It was a mistake," she admitted, her voice catching. "It wasn't love, and it wasn't what you thought. Ridge, it was only one moment of weakness. One moment I can't undo." The words shattered between them like glass. 5 words in particular wounded him to the bone. "It was a mistake, Ridge." He repeated them softly over and over, as if doing so would diminish the damage. But there was a blade embedded deep inside that he couldn't get out. Deacon did not hide. Ridge stormed to find him, fists clenched, rage blazing in his eyes, and Deacon didn't deny it. He stood firm, shoulders set, and addressed Ridge's rage with something resembling contrition. "I didn't mean to hurt you," Deacon explained. "But something occurred. You can despise me for it, and I will not blame you. But don't harm yourself by clinging to an unchangeable truth." The scandal spread like wildfire across the Forrester family. Brooke, despite her own troubled relationship with Deacon, took sadistic pleasure in Taylor's collapse. Even she couldn't disguise her sadness at seeing the family unravel. Steffi addressed her mother with shock and anguish on her face. Thomas, furious in his loyalty, lashed out at anyone who dared to criticize Taylor. But even his rage couldn't heal the schism that was developing through the family's center. Ridge withdrew. He wasn't the type of man to fall openly, but those who knew him noticed the change. His laughing was less frequent, his sentences were shorter, and his presence was more intense. He strode through the corridors of Forrester Creations, as if the walls themselves bore the weight of his disappointment. Meetings became background noise, while designs remained unfinished. He was there, but not really. Taylor wore her humiliation as a shroud she couldn't shed. She attempted to explain, reason, and remind Ridge of the years they'd spent together and the children they'd nurtured. She begged for forgiveness, but Ridge couldn't give what he didn't have. Once broken, trust is difficult to rebuild. Late at night, he would sit alone with a drink of scotch, pouring at designs that no longer moved him. He considered the simplicity of those 5 words. Ridge, it was a mistake. A mistake, undoubtedly, but one that had shattered the basis of everything he thought was unshakable. He wondered whether he had always built his life on illusions, choosing women who, like him, were defective in ways that made harmonious coexistence impossible. Brooke remained on the sidelines, divided between her residual feelings for Ridge and the cruel joy of witnessing Taylor fall. She wanted to be his comforter, the arms he clung to in his pain. But Ridge, for once, did not rush to anyone. He maintained his quiet, hesitant to give either woman the win of his dependence. Family gatherings were uncomfortable. Holidays that were once filled with laughter were now fraught with tension. Steffi fought to hold it together, her voice breaking as she implored her father to see reason, her mother to be strong, and her brother to suppress his fury. However, not all wounds heal just because someone wants them to. Ridge came into the Forrester estate one evening, as the sun dipped low and coated the sky in orange and gold, and stood in front of his family. His voice was soft, yet its weight permeated every part of the room. "I can't do this anymore," he admitted. "I can't live in a home where trust isn't present. I can't keep pretending things will go back to normal. I adore you all, but I need to discover myself again. Without this." The stillness that followed was louder than the debate. Taylor sobbed freely and collapsed into Steffi's arms. Thomas muttered beneath his breath and stormed out before anyone could stop him. Brooke's eyes welled up with tears which she fought to shed, knowing that despite Taylor's defeat, she had not completely won. Ridge left that night with just a suitcase and a heart too heavy to carry. He traveled aimlessly, until arriving at a little cabin tucked away in the foothills. There, and alone, he attempted to remember who he was before treachery, conflicting loyalties, and love had become a battlefield with only scars. The days blended into weeks. He packed notebooks with sketches not for fashion but for personal use. Simple lines, landscapes, and hazy memories of faces. In those peaceful hours he recognized something he'd always tried to deny. Love wasn't enough. Passion faded, loyalty wavered, and forgiveness arrived too late. He needed tranquility, which neither Brooke nor Taylor could provide anymore. Back in Los Angeles, the Forresters stumbled across. Taylor attempted to re-establish her reputation, but gossip followed her everywhere. Deacon, never really forgiven, maintained his distance, while his remorse lingered like a shadow. Brooke, while vindicated in some respects, found no true delight in the pandemonium. Watching Ridge walk away from everyone reminded her that winning was meaningless if it left her alone in the end. So the family remained fragmented, with each member holding a piece of the broken whole. They smiled when it was necessary and laughed when it was required, but underneath the surface sadness persisted. Ridge stayed in the cabin longer than anyone expected. He considered returning and dealing with the disaster he'd left behind. But then he'd hear Taylor's voice in his head, soft and broken, uttering those 5 words again, and he'd realize he wasn't ready. Perhaps he never will be. Finally, he was absorbed by grief rather than fury. Grief for the life he thought he had, for the family that would never be complete again, and for the man he once felt himself to be. And in his anguish, he realized the cruelest reality of all. Sometimes love is killed not by hatred, but by the calm destruction of disappointment. And as the world around him changed, and the Forresters continued their never-ending cycle of successes and scandals, Ridge stood apart, a man undone not by huge betrayals or dramatic conflicts, but by 5 simple words that changed everything.